Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the East Baton Rouge Parish Library's Mid-City Microcon. Although this is our third year doing the Mid-City Microcon, this is our very first 100% virtual con. The Mid-City Microcon is a celebration of diversity in comic book characters, creators, and their fans. This event provides a free, inclusive opportunity for new and lifelong fans to find themselves in the world of comics and art, both on the page and behind the scenes. We strive to amplify the voices of creators who challenge the status quo, especially those who have been historically underrepresented in the comic book industry, and also local creators from Baton Rouge and Louisiana. Unlike many comic book conventions, the Mid-City Microcon does not charge a fee to vendors nor attendees, thereby allowing more freelance, independent, and self-published creators a space to showcase their work. For more information about this year's Microcon, as well as previous years, please visit our website at ebrpl.com/mcmc. Thank you.
I'm Jason Walz. It's nice to meet you all. I'm going to try my best to keep track of the chat over here. I strongly encourage you to use it as much as you like. I'd like to have a conversation going as we go, so if you have questions or comments, just chime in with them. I think I'm going to test something here first. I'm going to try to share my screen. Chadwick Boseman, as many of you probably know, passed away yesterday. I know there's a strong connection between him and the Mid-City Microcon. It's probably been talked about already today, but anyway, I guess I didn't realize how much it was going to impact me, his passing. I'd like to share a video, so here's where I test and see if I'm capable of sharing a video. This is Chadwick Boseman. He's talking about the impact that Black Panther has had on the community. He's specifically talking about some young people that are fans that are that have cancer that he connected with. So this is about 2.5 minutes. After this, we'll jump into the presentation. So here you go.
All of it's been very personal, just watching the kids experience it. And for me, I would say, you know, there are two little kids, Ian and Taylor, who recently passed from cancer. And throughout our filming, I was communicating with them, knowing that they were both terminal. And what they said to me is, and their parents said, they're trying to hold on till this movie comes. And to a certain degree, you hear them say that and you're like, wow, that's like, I gotta get up and go to the gym. I gotta get up and go to work. You know, I gotta learn these lines. I gotta work on this accent. You know, seeing how devoted all of my castmates are, and knowing that will be something meaningful to them. But it's, to a certain degree, it's a humbling experience, because you're like, this can't mean that much to them, you know. But seeing how the world has taken us on, seeing how the movement, how it's taken on a life of its own, I realized that they anticipated something great. And I think back now to a kid and just, you know, waiting for Christmas to come, waiting for my birthday to come, waiting for a toy that I was going to get a chance to experience, or a video game. I did live life waiting for those moments. And so it put me back in the mind of being a kid, just to experience those two little boys' anticipation of this movie. And when I found out that they
take your time with it.
Yeah, it means a lot.
Sorry to start this so heavy, but I don't think there's a better example of how I can think of for today for why representation really matters. Yeah, Black Panther to me was a good movie that I really enjoyed. To a lot of other people, it meant so much more. Seeing yourself represented that way is it's everything. So yeah, I think that's a good start. We'll try to shake off kind of how heavy that is and talk about me growing up nerdy, which is going to be a pretty weird transition, but here we go. So I'm going to share my screen again. So yeah, I'm Jason Walz. I put this up here because I think this is sort of a good start before we jump into what I do. There's a quote here at the top. Know what happens when you decide a whole bunch of people are worthless? Someday they show you what they're worth, and you'll never see it coming. This is a quote from one of my books, and I thought it was a pretty good way to start out. Again, representation really matters. When you discount a whole group of people, eventually they are going to show you why they shouldn't be discounted. Yeah, so here's some of my books. Last Pick is what I'm known for right now. It's a trilogy of books. Last Pick came out a couple years ago. Last Pick, Born to Run, that's the second book in the trilogy, came out about a year ago. Then Last Pick, Rise Up is going to come out in about a month, and that will complete the trilogy of books. I'll talk more about what these books are about shortly. I will say that they're about giving people with disabilities a platform to be heroes. So that was my intention with them. I also am showing a few books down below there that I've done in the past also. Homesick, that is a graphic novel about losing my mom to cancer. A Story for Desmond, that is a book, a small comic that I wrote for my son, my first son when he was born. And then I did a online series called Crapshoot. And Crapshoot was where I would just sort of throw anything I could think of into a comic book anthology. It's a crapshoot. I would do short stories. I would invite other artists to join in. They'd all revolve around a theme. One would be love, lies, loss. There'd be free music downloads. So that's kind of the bulk of it. Yeah, let's dive in. This is me in middle school. How cool am I? So yeah, we're going to start by me talking about how I grew up, what got me into comics, some of my inspirations. We'll talk about what Last Pick means to me, why I wrote that story, and why I thought it was important to put it out there. And if we have time, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about how I made comics. Again, I don't see the chat popping up on here right now, but oops. But I'll figure it out. Feel free to chime in if you have questions. I'll check back on it a little bit later. So yeah, this is me in middle school. I loved comics. And I also had corrective shoes, seizures, frequent seizures, braces, allergic to bee stings, so I had to carry around a bee kit. Also, so a lot of things that kept me from the cool club. I would put this picture you're seeing here. I posted outside my locker. That lasted about 5 minutes before it was ripped up. Put it inside my locker and laminated, so it was really pristine and taken care of. What I wanted more than anything else, though, was to be cool, but I just painfully was not in middle school. And I wanted to make comics for young adults because I think that's it's a common feeling that we have at some point in our life. This need to fit in and this feeling that you just aren't fitting in. That whatever you do doesn't let you sort of step into the cool kids club. I needed it to, I wanted to put it out there into the world and say that, yeah, you're going to go through that. You might be this kid that you're looking at here that's got, thinks drawing a robot body is super cool. But really these unique voices are exactly what the world needs. So whatever your unique perspective on life is, whether you feel like you totally fit in or you feel like you don't fit in at all, these are valid voices that the world needs to connect with. Next, So I grew up in Brandenburg, Kentucky, which is kind of the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, really small town. It was quite a long drive to get to a movie theater or a large grocery store. What we did have was a very small grocery store called Key Market. And the left of the screen there, you see a spinner rack. The spinner rack is around middle school. That ended up over by the cash register at Key Market. So every month you get sort of the monthly comics that would pop up, or weekly. And my mom started letting me buy them sometimes. So that was my first sort of introduction to, oh, there's a world outside of Brandenburg, Kentucky, and it is weird and strange and amazing. The first comic that really blew my mind is the one you see right there, Amazing Spider-Man, issue 252, where he gets his new black suit. For all the nerds out there, you know exactly what that black suit turns into. It turns into Venom about a year later in comic book world. And that blew my mind. So, you know, middle school Jason thought that a monster that runs around like bites the head off of villains was about the coolest thing ever. Around that same time came Return of the Jedi. I have a Revenge of the Jedi poster up there. Super nerdy. Ghostbusters, Clash of the Titans. So those things really defined me too. They defined everybody that was my age around that time too. But this was before the internet. I didn't realize that the whole world loved these things the same way I did. They felt very personal and very specific to me. So the idea of this mythology in Star Wars and the monsters and ghosts and superheroes. I grew up super religious, but I started to place that sort of the thing that I connected to with religion. It moved over to sort of these mythologies that are also very religious on their own. There's similar themes. So monsters, sci-fi, fantasy, there was no turning back. Once I learned about these things, it was in my DNA, completely and 100%. Also in middle school, I started to make my own comics, brute force. I did one a month for an entire year. I think they were probably around 20 pages each. And I would walk around and sell them. I can't see, my glasses aren't on. How much should I sell these for? Yeah, 75 cents. So I'm walking around and I'm saying, you know, want to buy brute force for 75 cents? Again, I wanted to be cool. This meant I wasn't cool. But what it did do is it started to give me the feeling that I was a comic creator. And that's the amazing thing about comics and so many other things is once you do it, you are that. So once you make that first comic, you are a comic creator. You write that first song, you are a songwriter. You build that first thing out of wood, you're a carpenter. So yeah, completing that first thing is really important. So doing this let me feel like it wasn't some distant dream. Being a comic creator meant that it was very realistic, that it's something that you could do. Comics especially, you're in full control, or you can be. I was able to be the writer and illustrator, do anything I want. Pretty much all I wanted to do was rip off Conan the Barbarian, clearly from these. But yeah, it was huge for me. It was a real start. Brute force, if I remember right, the main character, his catchphrase in this was, "Oh boy." And I thought it was just hilarious. Every time he'd get in trouble, he'd be like, "Oh boy." And I'd be like, this guy's got a great catchphrase. So all I wanted when I get into high school was to be super cool. And I also wanted a girlfriend. So I totally turned my back on comics, saved up all that money in high school and put it towards the things that I thought were very important, like acid wash jeans that I could tight roll, a cool leather jacket, Janet Jackson Brother Nation, Tom Cruise sunglasses, all the things that were pretty cool in the 80s. At least we thought they were in the late 80s. So yeah, no more comics for me. I was like, nope, that's kid stuff. I am putting that behind me. I am going to focus on growing up and being cool. Flash forward. Get it? Flash forward. The Flash. Yeah, no, it's not a very good joke. Flash forward. Many years later, I go to college, leave college. I become a teacher. I've been a teacher for 20 years now, teaching special education. So I had all these things, the monsters, the sci-fi, the superheroes, the fantasy that really defined who I was. But over time, the other thing that started to define who I was my work in the world of special education. So much of that was in my DNA now also. So these things that you live your life kind of collecting, these different elements that make you who you are. Those elements eventually end up in whatever you do. For me, it ended up going into the books that I write and the way that I teach. So unfortunately, through all that time, I still had turned my back on comics for the most part. It wasn't until, gosh, well, I'm kind of jumping out of time here, but post-college, so let's say probably 2000, I get back into comics because I didn't realize all the cool stuff that was out there that I was missing out on. So growing up, it was mostly, you know, straightforward superheroes that I had access to. Post-college, I discovered that superheroes had grown up with me, and then I had the opportunity to like discover Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, V for Vendetta, Sandman, which was one of the biggest influences on me. And then Strangers in Paradise. If you're not familiar with Strangers in Paradise, it is this massive storyline of these two women that are in love. Very soap opera-y in the best possible way. Independent published by Terry Moore. Beautiful drawings. I love these two so much, Katchu and Francine. Their love story is amazing. So that was another big impact on me also. So I grew up with, like I said, you know, Spider-Man, I had Transformers, G.I. Joe, these kind of comics that you think of from back in the 80s. I didn't really have access to a wide variety of comics. Life has changed in a big way as far as that goes. I wouldn't say there's a comic for everybody. We still have a ways to go, but there's almost a comic for everybody. So I just plopped these up here. You're interested in comics, you're maybe interested in making it, you're interested in reading, you just read. There's a comic out there. If you're having trouble figuring out where to start with comics, email me, or actually probably better, and I'll have my social media link at the end. I love to give suggestions on comics. So if you're like, nah, there's not a comic for me, test me. I can find one for you. So that's just a sampling of some of the comics that I use in my classroom a lot and that I just happen to love myself. My first graphic novel, Homesick, I worked on after my mom died. She died about 10 years ago. Cancer, after a long battle with it. I took some time off, so I put all these things that were me, no other way to do it, that's just what we do, we put ourselves into whatever we do, into this book, Homesick. I didn't want to tell a straightforward story about my mom dying of cancer. I wanted to be relatable to a lot of people. So I did sort of introduce a sci-fi element to it. There's a dual storyline of a cosmonaut lost out in space, and together they tell a story about letting go and loss. I also include autobiographical information about me teaching. Yeah, so you're starting to see these different elements that are me being sprinkled into the work that I'm doing. And that gets us to last pick. Whew. What is last pick? So last pick, let me give you the pitch, if you're not familiar with it. Aliens come to Earth. They take away everyone between the age of 16 and 65. They leave behind the ones they think are too young, too old, or the ones that they label as having a disability. Spoiler alert, those are our heroes. Teaching in special education, a lot of my work was helping find students jobs. So I was working past, 10 years with students 18 to 21-year-olds, trying to help them get jobs. And I realized that we're really good in this country of creating laws that help, in theory, level the playing field and give everybody equal opportunities. In reality, I think we do a terrible job of that. So anytime I would help this intelligent, brilliant, capable student go in for an interview for a job, anytime human resources realized that they had to change things around to help this student succeed at the workplace, they'd get a no. And that was happening really often. So that started to upset me and the students quite a bit. This sort of inability to break through and to be seen as who they fully are. So that started to become the beginning of this idea for Last Pick. I didn't want it to be a straightforward story about how those with disabilities are fighting against the injustices of our world. I don't think I could do a good job telling that story. A lot of people could. I can do a pretty good job telling that story, but including monsters in it. I needed there to be a straightforward villain outside of sort of bureaucracy. Yeah, I just brought in a lot of nasty monsters that sort of divided people up into those that are able and those that are unable. I also worked on these because I have 2 kids now, 2 young boys. I wanted them to grow up in a world where they saw a lot of representation out there in popular media. Also, as 2 white boys, they're going to be 2 white men someday. It was very important to me that they were kind and empathetic and patient and understood that this is a world full of a lot of different people and that it is up to them and everyone else to make sure that there's an equal opportunity for everybody here. I'm hoping that some of that comes through in this book without it becoming preachy. I hope it's the sort of the themes that lie underneath the whole thing. Having a lot of monster chases helps, and hopefully those themes sort of seep in. Some of the representation I included in my comics were just this idea that I wanted to reflect the world we live in. I think sometimes we, when we're creating, we're oftentimes only including people that maybe we have a little limited experience with. The world is extremely diverse, with a lot of different people with a lot of different experiences, shared and unshared. So I really worked hard to try and include a lot of a wide cast of characters with a lot of representation. People from different parts of the world, different age groups. Yeah. So that was definitely littered throughout the book. Book 2, this character, her name's Harper. She really gets to shine, and I was really proud of her. I cannot speak sign language very well, so I reached out to 2 professors that sign language was, ASL was their primary language, their primary language, and they helped me create her character and the way that she speaks to the world. Communicates with the world. And so they did a lot of, I would say, how would she say this? And they would take a video of them doing it, and we'd go back and forth trying to figure out what that would look like in, as an illustration. So yeah, that's how she communicates. Oftentimes you see underneath where she signs a translation in text. Sometimes I don't have that when I feel like in the context of the story it's understandable. But yeah, I love Harper. Any mistakes that are done in the sign language are completely my fault and not the brilliant people that I worked with. This is Wyatt. He is one of the 2 heroes of the book. There's Wyatt and his twin, Sam. I never label in the books that Wyatt has autism. But since most of my time has been spent working with students on the autism spectrum, I definitely wanted to create a character that was fully human, but also had autism. So I show moments within the story where he might be dealing with things in a way that are maybe neurotypical. They're not neurotypical. So I've got, I'm showing different moments in his life where he has to navigate it maybe slightly differently than we would. The danger in representing anyone with a disability is that it starts to become the disability is their character. Looking at this screen right now, that's exactly what it looks like. I would like to say that I try to very much show Wyatt as a full human, and every now and then we see moments of his life where we sort of get insight into what his autism may look like for him. Yeah. Showing a couple more of my characters from the books. I've got my team, sort of the hero team at the top left. Over on the right, got another character with cerebral palsy. Bottom left, I'm trying to show, there's a few pages where my heroes are putting their all their meds together. They're going to need it for a heist that they're putting on. So I'm trying to give sort of a broad sense of what it might be like to have a disability without defining my characters by their disability. I think that one of the biggest problems in media is when we do just that. The dangers of depicting those with disabilities as just showing their disabilities or just showing them as purely inspiring. I think it's a trap that it's easy to fall into. Sometimes I even did, and I had to really rewrite and redraw some things where I felt like that was happening. I got some examples here of what I'm talking about. At the RNC, the Republican National Convention, the other day, you had Madison Cawthorn, who is wheelchair bound. The idea was, you know, if he could make himself stand for the national anthem, then we all should. And I've got a lot of issues with something like that. I think one of my biggest problems is it plays into the hand of sort of ableism. The idea that his standing was meant to inspire non-disabled people rather than those with disabilities. It's showing that he can overcome his disability. Or these inspirational posters on the side, the only disability in life is a bad attitude. And I added this and I felt bad about it because I have not read the book Wonder. So this is not a slam against the book Wonder since I have not read it. I did see some of the movie Wonder. And I think it's also sort of a poor example of representing somebody with a disability in the sense it shows them as an inspiration and leaves out sort of this idea of like, what does it mean to navigate a school system that is not built for those with disabilities? Or what does it mean, or how do we lower the rates of bullying with those with disabilities? Or how do we make it about acceptance rather than an inspiration? So I do think it is very important for people to consider creating full characters rather than just people that represent a point of view that you want to get across. And now I'm going to jump into, I'm going to see if I can stop sharing for a minute to see if I'm missing any chats or anything here. Let me see if I can find a chat screen. Yeah, I'm going to jump in here. I got a question here saying, Jason, you have written a paper about your experience. You worked in so much evidence-based practice in the creation of your comic. Thank you. I appreciate that. I have mixed feelings about, thank you. I did work very hard on it, and I worked very hard on creating a representation that mattered. This might be a good time for me to chime in and say, there is a movement within that began in YA literature and then has spread everywhere, the hashtag own voice. So here's where I own a little bit of that. So hashtag own voice was about stories being told by through the voice of those that have lived those experiences. So I am depicting a lot of people in my books that do not carry the same disabilities that I may have. And it's a tricky thing. You have to be extremely careful about assuming your perspective can translate to that perspective. Anyway, I do think that right now, so those with disabilities in the United States and in the world are the largest marginalized group that exists. I have numbers here somewhere. As a matter of fact, I want to share them. So 1 billion in the world identify as having some form of disability. 110 million experience significant disabilities. Those are big numbers, really big numbers. Now, I do understand the idea of a disability is extremely broad, but there's value in whatever those disabilities are, for sure. So I do think we're at the precipice of a revolution for those with disabilities. Been marginalized for a long time, and I think their voice is going to be heard one way or another. So I do know I'm at the beginning of sort of representation of those disabilities in media, but it'll be exciting when there's a more diverse group of voices telling these stories. Hope that makes sense. But yes, I did work very hard, especially with Wyatt. I worked with several students of mine to help create the character of Wyatt, so it's as honest as possible. In showing a form of autism. Thank you for that comment, though. Again, feel free to chime in whenever you like. Let's see, share screen. Let's go back to that for a moment. So here's where I'm going to give a little bit of advice on creating stories. Write what you know. So this is my little Calvin and Hobbes comic strip that I always put up there because honestly I love Calvin and Hobbes. And if you don't, you need to read more Calvin and Hobbes. We need all voices in storytelling. What I know, I've kind of shared with you. What I know comes from my point of view. It also comes from a cis, white, neurotypical male for the most part. We live in an exciting time where that voice is not the only voice that's heard from anymore. We have a long ways to go. If you have a point of view on life, the world needs your point of view right now. The more diverse stories we get out into the world, the more empathetic people can become. I believe that empathy comes from reading. When you're able to read the experiences of other people, see the experiences of other people, I do believe that that is what helps grow empathy. And man, do we need more empathy now. We need it now more than ever. So start to think about what are those things that you know a lot about. I've shared with you what I know about. I know a lot about monsters. I know a lot about sci-fi. I know a lot about some of my students in special education, but whatever that thing is that you know a lot about, that ends up becoming part of your storytelling. It ends up becoming part of who you are. If you want to be a storyteller, make sure that that fits in there somewhere, because that's what's going to make it authentic and easy to connect with for other people who might share those same things. My other advice, what I think about when I am writing is trying to think about what are the things that make us human. I mean, it's a long list. When you think about things like greed or jealousy or loneliness or hunger, those are sort of the negative side, or the parts that we try to overcome. And then there's love and compassion, empathy and kindness. And these are all things that make us human. And if you're not including those in your stories, if you're not talking about what it means to be a human, then I don't know who your stories are for. Because humans want to know how to be human, or see what it is to be human. And they get that from storytelling. There's a lot of responsibility in that. What do you want to put out there into the world that's showing what humanity can be or what humanity is? My last bit of advice for creating stories is, and this is my favorite bit of advice, it is to be really painfully cruel to your main characters. I mean, treat them like garbage. And what I mean by that is you create these characters that you love so much. That's my Sam and Wyatt. I love them to pieces. But then you put them through the worst scenarios you can think of. I think the most garbage story is, so-and-so meets so-and-so and they fall in love and live happily ever after. That's not a story anyone wants to know about. Life is hard. There's bumps and roadblocks the entire time. What makes humans amazing is the ability to navigate that and to overcome it. So that's definitely what I think about in my story writing is I create my characters I love, and then I put them through some tough stuff before I get them to where I need them to be. And if you think about any heroes or protagonists in stories that you care about them because they've had to overcome something, oftentimes quite a bit. We're going to quickly go through some things. How you make comics, revise. Book one took, so here's how it works. I get from First Second Macmillan, I get a year to create each of those 3 books. So a year for book one. That includes writing a script, getting it approved, drawing in pencil, and inking. I hired a colorist, John Proctor, did the color on these pages here that you're looking at. He's amazing. Thank you, John Proctor. But yeah, it's a lot of work. Doing something well is difficult and it's not always fun. I read a book by Stephen King, also in middle school, about writing. And in there, he talks about treating it like a job. Like he doesn't always want to write. He makes himself sit down and put together so many words on a page every day. I'd say the same for me, and I bet a lot of people feel the same way. To get something done, you don't always love doing it, even if it is something you feel strongly about, like making comics. But you make yourself do that hard work. And then by the end, you've created something that you could feel proud of. If you only do it when you are inspired, sometimes that thing never gets done. I think inspiration is a little bit overrated sometimes. I think the hard work is where it pays off. Yeah. So this is the pitch. It all starts with a pitch. I put this out there, but we don't have time for me to hear from everybody. Can you tell the idea in 2 or 3 sentences? I was thinking about sharing about like Harry Potter. Harry Potter is this massive collection of books. Can you tell somebody what Harry Potter is about in a sentence or 2? I think if you're able to do that for your story that you have around, maybe tumbling around in your head, you might have a really good story. You don't tell all the different parts of Harry Potter. It boils down to the boy who survived, but is kind of plagued by this monster that he has to fight at the end. That was actually a terrible way to tell what Harry Potter is, but hopefully you get my idea. Don't get lost in sort of all the details of your world. Maybe you have 1,000 planets where there's 1,000 different languages. That's maybe not what your story is about. That might be something that sort of makes your story unique and interesting, but don't get lost in the weeds of those little details. I see that a lot, especially in sci-fi. Students share their sci-fi work and it becomes so complex that they're losing the thread of the story. Yeah, then there's the script. It is my least favorite part of this whole thing. I write it. It takes me forever. I send it off to my editor and I know that she's gonna love it. She's gonna cry because it's the most beautiful, amazing thing she's ever read. But really what happens is I get 1,000 revisions back saying, no, work on this, let's do this better. It's the hardest part. Revise. That's a big part of doing anything is you rarely get it right the first time. So be open to really working on it, trying some new things. This is what a page looks like in blue pencil. Yeah, so I sketch out on 11 by 17 paper. It's larger than when it ends up being printed out. So here is sort of the size of the book. Here's the size of the paper that I draw on. So it's, it's a big difference. There's no right way to make comics, and there's really no wrong way to make comics. You could do it you can do it very tiny. You can do it the size that it's going to be printed out on. I like to draw big and then ink big on a big piece of paper, and then you shrink it down. Everything looks so good. All those sort of loose lines become tightened up. I just happen to like that quite a bit. So I do it with blue pencil because once I ink over it, I can click a couple buttons in Adobe Photoshop and all my blue pencil disappears and it looks like I just did ink. Boom, right there. Yeah, so again, this is a page, spoiler for book 3. This is what I'm holding up here. This is sort of what a final one looks like. I don't know if you can see in there, my little tiny screen. Yeah, and there's probably, if you look really carefully, you might even see some pencil. But once I send that off to my editor, the pencil's gone. It looks about as clean as I can get it. And then another round of revisions happens. That's where you look and you say, this is working, this isn't working. You redo, redo, redo. That part is also pretty humbling. But luckily, I have an amazing editor, and I trusted her 100% on those choices, and she's right. Yeah, scanning and cleanup, that's where I do all that stuff. Colors, we talked about that. Cover design. That's a whole other thing. So if you look down right about here, this is what I wanted my cover for Last Pick to be. Over on the right is what it ended up being. In between those two were about 20 other possibilities. When you self-publish, you can do whatever you want. When you publish when you put something out through a publisher, you're a team, and it's up to you whether or not you want to listen to the team. So I definitely did, and they directed me towards what they thought was a more appropriate young adult title that would show up on a shelf. So yeah, it's a lot of listening to other people and taking in other people's input. That's the 3 books. I've thrown up there my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's at Jason W. Walz. You can reach me there. Remember, reach out to me if you have any if you need a comic book recommendation. I'd love to do that for you. I'm going to check in with chat real quick here. And if there's time, I can do a short drawing demonstration, but really I'd love to answer any questions you might have. So I'm going to check in here. Thank you, Nicolette. I appreciate it. I've been sitting here through ideas about stories about folks who are differently abled are sometimes viewed as only valuable to be inspiration to able-bodied folks. Very thought-provoking. Thank you. Yeah, I know. I think about it too, and I screw up all the time. I think in this time we live in now, where it's up to all of us to be accountable, to be better humans. Screwing up is okay. We're going to screw up a lot, and we're going to do things the wrong way. And I think the important thing is being able to acknowledge that and grow from it. So, I mean, I'm working on it all the time. I'm also going to do a quick shout out to a documentary called Crip Camp, CRIP Camp. It's on Netflix. And if you haven't seen it, you should. If you have seen it, I'd love to hear from you in the chat. It's amazing. It is basically, it's about the amazing people with disabilities that forced the creation of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Maybe that sounds kind of dry and boring, but you'll be shocked that that story hasn't been taught in schools, because it's gripping and amazing. It's filled with heroes that are doing remarkable things. So Crip Camp, it's a really good movie, hour and a half, Netflix. It may change your life. It did mine for sure. It's changed how I teach, no doubt about it. Another one on here from CD. I confess, as an autistic person, I worry that my odd experience of life is what would make my own stories unrelatable to others. My caregiver lovingly points out when I think something is a common thought and it is not, for example. CD, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that a lot. I think, first of all, you know your experience is better than anyone else. I will say that feeling that you have, the odd perspective, the feeling that you have an odd perspective on life, many of us have had that at one point or another. Many of us still have that. I will say for myself, the people that have, in their point of view, sort of odd experiences on life are my favorite people on planet Earth. And I try to surround myself with those people. They're the ones that make life interesting. I also am drawn to books, fiction. I'm a fiction reader. I don't read a lot of nonfiction. I'm drawn to books written by creators that I would say probably see the world in an odd way. We need that. We need odd perspectives now more than ever. I think the perspectives that many of us have had have maybe run their course. We need to open up the platform to more voices, because we can do better. I think humanity can do a lot better. And maybe it's time for us to, instead of saying this voice is on the outside or this perspective is on the outside, I think we need to say it's time to remove that outside and start listening to some other voices with other point of views. That was a bit of a ramble, but I hope it gets across that a lot of people are like me, and they're drawn to those voices that see the world differently. I think can be a huge benefit. Jay, would a children's book and a comic book use pretty much the same process? Or do you think there's some major differences in how the creator, writer, illustrator approaches these? Great question, Jay. I haven't done a children's book yet. I have a friend, a really close friend. His name's Drew Brockington. Some of you may know him. He is the author and illustrator of Catstronauts. If you've got any young people in your life, you probably know about Catstronauts. They're these adorable cats that are astronauts. There's lots of cat puns, and people love it. Anyway, all that to say, he also makes picture books. Talking to him, I don't think the process is very different in the ways you would expect. Making a comic book or graphic novel takes a lot longer. There's a lot more work. You also have to, Tiffany loves Catstronauts, I know, it's great. Made a comic or graphic novel takes a lot more work. In a picture book, you may have one picture to a page or two pictures in a page. Those pictures are going to balance the text out and give you just enough information for what's on that page that kids need to know about. I think comics or graphic novels, you may have several panels on a page. And sort of balancing how each one tells a little part of that story, I think is really time consuming. I'm not saying it's harder. I don't think I could write a picture book well or draw a picture book well. I would say it's different. And the difference really comes in, there's that, it's called the gutter. It's that space between the panels is called the gutter. And that gutter is such a mysterious land of who knows what. It's about time. How much time passed between this panel and that next panel? And getting that just right, I feel like is really tricky. And it definitely, I spend a lot of time thinking about it, trying to get that just right. It's my slowest. It's when I go back and I redo pages, it's usually because I feel like those panels, the pacing, something has been wrong about it and it's made it confusing. So that's what I probably work most on, is that. Any other questions or comments before we maybe do a quick drawing? Okay, I'll check back on this in a minute. Looks like we have maybe about 10 minutes, so this might be the quickest drawing ever, but that's fine. I'm going to turn my computer and set up the easel really quick. Let's see if we can do better than that. There we go. Question from Tiffany. Have I written curriculum? Thanks, Tiffany. I appreciate it. Yes. No, I have not. Sherry Benetham, an amazing educator. She created a curriculum for Last Pick. It's available on my website. I think it's on the homepage. I've made it very hard to find for no reason at all. I need to do a better job at that. If you cannot find it on my website, please reach out to me on social media. I'll get it to you for free. It is free. So anyone can use it if you're homeschooling or you're teaching distance learning or whatever. It's available for anyone that wants it. So thanks. All right, let's do a quick drawing. I usually draw one of my main characters. Today, I'm feeling like I just want to draw a monster. So let's do a monster drawing. The way I draw monsters, either on purpose or because it's my style, I try to make them creepy and scary, but they always end up looking kind of cute. I think it's just my style. Nothing I can do about it. I usually start with the eyes. I feel like with characters, I want to make sure everybody can see this okay. I feel like with characters, there's a lot of personality in the eyes themselves. If you get that right, it's going to tell you a lot about who the character is. So for some reason, I started doing sort of these spirally eyes for most of my aliens in the books. I think it's just a fun way to sort of differentiate the aliens from the humans. I like to do a heavy shadow underneath the eyes. Gives sort of a menacing look to the creatures. Under the eyebrows, I do a little shadow there. Just try to darken it up as much as possible. I mean, these guys are evil. So I think sort of really putting some shadow underneath their eyes helps sort of get that across. I'm going to give them a good snarl. Let's see. How am I going to do my snarl? I'm going to get some teeth here before he opens his mouth up too much. This is going to go, let's have his mouth come back here. Give him some big teeth at the bottom here. So there's his big, nasty mouth. If I had time, I would definitely shade this in. Let's give him a little weird tongue sticking out here, too. So it's part of my alien. Also with my aliens, I like to give them lots of bumps and make them as gross as possible. When I start to create this head here, I'm going to think about sort of like boils and things like that. The kind of things that might make it look a little bit like it's decrepit and falling apart, because their point of view on life is that others are not as good as them or as qualified as them or able as them. And I'd like it to believe that that point of view has kind of made them disgusting. So I'm doing this up here on this head here. Lots of bumps. And then we're going to come down to here. Give him some more bumps down here. And then oftentimes I'm going to have a big sort of body behind them. maybe they're going to be sort of like squishy. Again, it's this idea that their personality is coming out in who they are, what they look like. So sort of like melty, squishy, falling apart. So let's try to give them a big old belly here. There we go. Well, that was a really fast, quick, and down and dirty idea. So that would be sort of the idea of like the blue pencil part of the sketch. And then after that, I use ink and I go in there and I clean everything up and make it look as professional as possible. This is the part that usually people never see. I try to hide that from the world. This is where I start to like work out all the details and see that it either works or doesn't work. Then alone in my drawing room, I clean it all up so it looks like I knew what I was doing the whole time. Okay. We're almost time for a wrap up. I want to come back to here and check in with everybody. I hope that Mid-City Microcon's been going well. I want to send my thoughts out to everybody down in Louisiana right now. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot going on everywhere in the world, but especially thinking about you all right now. And it's nice that we have this sort of distraction right now from that and a chance to connect and talk about some of these things. But yeah, to those down there, thinking about you, hope everyone's doing well, and excited that Mid-City Microcon has found a way to sort of keep going. Everyone's getting creative right now. Yeah, any other questions? If not, my reminder is just a shout out to books 1 and 2 are available right now. Book 3 comes out, I think, October 6th. Available for pre-order wherever you get your books right now. Should be able to get it. I highly recommend IndieBound. You can order a book through IndieBound and it will show up from a local bookstore. Independent bookstore. Obviously, your libraries. You have amazing librarians around you right now. Support your libraries. Yeah, that's it. If there's nothing else, I think we're going to sign off. Thank you all so much for your time. Have a great day.